when I was praying, it's like, Lord, what should we talk about this summer? And I felt them pulling me towards the Sabbath, and I'm like, oh gosh, it's kind of like going to a convention and Jeff Bezos of Amazon is there and he wants to talk about shopping. You know what I mean? It's just so on the nose. Like, of course, Adventists are going to talk about Sabbath. That's all they ever talk about. Sabbath, 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 all the time. And here we're going to do it all summer long. So you're stuck with me and you're stuck with the Sabbath this summer. Because here's the premise. So often, when Adventists talk about Sabbath, so many books, they're in the context of Sunday or Sabbath, Sunday, Saturday, Sabbath, all right? But there's so much more to this than the debate about which day. The Sabbath is just this really, really beautiful thing we find in the Scriptures, and it's worth us kind of getting past that discussion and go deeper. And what I've found as I've pastored churches around this country is a lot of people have a lot of love for the Sabbath, a lot of respect for it, but not as much maybe theological understanding of the Sabbath. So this series is going to go deep. Today we're going to do a flyover of the Sabbath in the Bible, but then we're going to go week by week through the Sabbath at creation, through the Sabbath at Sinai, through the Sabbath throughout the Scripture. We're just going to go from one end to the other. And it's going to be fun. I promise you, it's going to be fun. It's going to be interesting. I think it's going to be really engaging because we often don't. It's kind of like one of those things where if you didn't grow up Adventist, just forgive me for this. But if you kind of have spent a long time in the Adventist bubble, you just hear it so much. It's one of those things that you think you know about, but if somebody ever asks you a particular question, you're like, oh man, I actually don't know the answer to that question. I need to go read this. Sometimes we can become so familiar with a thing, we don't actually know a lot about it, but what we think we do because we hear about it all the time. Does that make sense? It's not just about Sabbath. That's true for everything. Like people talk about Jesus paid it all and Jesus died on the cross and all these things. And it's like we hear this all the time as Christians, but what exactly happened? How exactly did he do it? Case in point, when you read the Gospels, we often are not paying attention to the ways that Matthew tells a story different than Luke, or Mark tells a story different than both of them, or John tells a story differently than everybody, because everyone's got that person. There's 1 out of 4 that's extra. And John is that extra gospel writer. We don't often notice these things. We just kind of smooth over some of these really significant contextual differences that we find. I don't want to get into all that right now, but it's because we hear these stories so much we don't often really read them in a detailed, careful way. So that's what we're going to do with Sabbath. Okay, and so that's what we're calling this. It's the Sabbath Summer Series. So we are in Illinois, and we are nowhere near a beach of any repute, but just look at that picture for a second and just pretend that life is sunny and beachy, and you hear the ocean or something near you. I know Laura's going to do that. It's a beautiful thing that America is full of forests and mountains and deserts and coastal areas and swampy areas. We almost have everything here, snow, sun, whatever. And then anytime we're talking about a family vacation, where does Laura want to go? The beach. Every single time. It's like the only thing we have. We should have been born on an island or something. The beach is the only place to go. All right? So here's where we start. You guys know this one? In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. And then what follows is aardvarks and foxes and three-toed sloths and other animals, I presume, that started. And we read through this, and then there's the sun, and then there's the moon, and then there's all of these things that are created and separated and divided and all these cool things. And then we find this verse at the end of that all. It says, by the seventh day, God had finished the work he had been doing. So on the seventh day, he rested from all his work. Was God tired? Probably not. Right, but he chose this moment, and man, what I love about this so much is just the subversion of this creation story. And we're so used to, even when we're little, if you grew up in church, you're used to, these days, what did God create on this day and this day and this day? And then when you're older, you forget what he created on a particular day, right? If I asked you what did he create in day 3, you would tell me Exactly. But we're so used to this story, we don't catch the subversion in it. We don't catch the subversion in it. And on the contrary, the popular conception is that Jesus got rid of this Sabbath thing for us. Because doesn't Hebrews 4 tell us that we who have believed have entered that rest just as God said? And the rest that people say is now we've entered the rest that Jesus provides and we don't need Sabbath anymore. But I think what we're going to find that's really, really interesting about this is the Bible never really talks about the Sabbath ending. What you find, if you trace the Sabbath through the trajectory of the Bible, is what you find is this day is constantly beginning again and again and again and again. And we're going to talk about three beginnings. Arguably Mount Sinai could be the fourth beginning. We're going to talk about three beginnings. You find it in creation. Okay, it's there. And then at Sinai, it gets repeated again. Actually, in Exodus 16, just before Sinai, it gets repeated again. And then it gets kind of elevated a little bit because suddenly it's instead of a precedent, which is what we have at creation, God rests on the seventh day. Suddenly at Sinai, now it becomes a law. And then more details are added to it, right? Not only should you not be working on the Sabbath, but you should also make sure the people who are under your authority or influence or whatever, including your animals, should not have to work either. Now, I'm trying to get our two dogs to work as much as I possibly can. But if you've seen Ace and Nala, they weigh 10 pounds together. And, I'm looking on Etsy for a tiny little plow to hitch to them. See if they can't do some work, okay? But otherwise, back then, right, you had animals do your work. You had oxen and you had horses, and you needed these animals. You relied on these animals in order to get stuff done around the farm or around the house. And so the Sabbath commandment at Sinai is like, no, don't make your animals work. Like they get a Sabbath too. I mean, do you realize how amazing that is? Like even your animals, which, you're not going to go into the barn and catch your goat reading the Bible, okay? Like they're not on that same intellectual level as we are, but even if they don't completely understand why, they get this day off too. And you got to keep in mind, the weekend that we all enjoy, the Saturday and Sunday thing, is a very recent invention. It's about 100 years old. Before that, nobody ever had a weekend. When Christendom was reigning in Europe and so on, people would take Sundays off. But that was it. There was no 2-day weekend. Like you would take Sundays off and go to church. And that's it. Like the weekend is a very, very, very recent thing. So you understand, it's hard sometimes for modern people to read about this fourth commandment, the Sabbath commandment, and be like, okay, so they get a day off. Cool. Like nobody got a day off. Nobody got a day off. You didn't go to Walmart and get food just because you didn't feel like planting this year. You had to do these things to survive, but God's like, no. I know you feel that pressure, right? This could be a famine year. This could be a dry year. I need to grow my crops or else I'm going to starve and my family will starve and other people will starve who rely upon me. It's like we had this survival mindset back then, and God's like, no. I want you to take a day off and stop worrying about your survival. And don't just take this day off and rest, but give your children rest. Give whatever servants you may have rest. Give your animals rest. Like everybody can take a day where they're freed not just from physical labor, but from the strain of worrying about your survival, about worrying about your next day and how we're going to make it this year. And just rest in every sense of that word. The Sabbath is a revolutionary thing. So what starts at creation, we're only told that God rested, he blessed it and sanctified it. We're going to get back there in a moment. That's all we know about it at creation. But then at Sinai, it gets elevated and it gets more beautiful. And it begins again by being invested with even newer meaning, even more additional meaning it takes on at Sinai. And then you think, okay, well, it ran its course for a little while. Jesus comes, right? Jesus changes everything. Jesus must then become our rest. And now we no longer have to worry about Sabbath anymore. And the Sabbath begins again there as well. And you think, well, okay, it should end here, right? But we find the Sabbath constantly in the Gospels, in the life of Jesus, where he's healing people on Sabbath, and people are having a problem with this, right? How dare you heal this person with a hand injury on Sabbath? They confront Jesus on one occasion, and Jesus is like, you guys just don't understand the Sabbath. It's not a day of don't. It's a day meant for people's good. He says in one place that the Sabbath was made for mankind, not mankind made for the Sabbath. In other words, the Sabbath was designed to serve you, to benefit you, to bless you. You weren't made to serve the day. And like here's the Sabbath beginning again, being invested with new meaning, being given a breath of fresh air once again by Jesus. And then it doesn't even end there. If you want to add that fourth beginning, I really want to talk about three, but we'll talk about four beginnings. The fourth beginning we find in the book of Revelation, where the Sabbath gets invested with new meaning once again. And that new meaning is, when you read Revelation 21 and 22, the last two chapters of the Bible, you realize they parallel the first two chapters of the Bible very, very closely. And we find there that in this new heavens and this new earth, people are given the rest that they had always been promised from the Sabbath. Like the Sabbath is not just a day in this new world, it's the way we live every day. And you realize, oh man, all along, this Sabbath thing that we celebrate every week was for thousands of years, was always pointing forward to this time when we would always have rest and we wouldn't be worried about food insecurity, we wouldn't be worried about danger, we wouldn't be worried about these other things. Like this is what it was trying to remind us of the whole time. This is what it was trying to point us toward the whole time. Okay, are you getting it? So every time you think, okay, well, Sabbath's been around for a while, surely it's going to die now. It doesn't. It gets new life breathed into it. It gets new meaning added to it. So the trajectory of the Sabbath over the Bible is just that it keeps going like higher and higher, like up these stairs until we finally make it to the consummation of all of our hopes in the new heavens and the new earth where God dwells among us. Is that good news? That's good news. So that's what we're going to be exploring. No big deal. In fact, I think we've outcovered it, so we're done now, right? Oh, you wish. You wish. I have to go edit my sermons on Monday when I kind of take them out of this live stream and then put them up by themselves, and I'm like, did I really talk that long? All right, so you, Angel, are going to be my timekeeper. I want you to throw something at me if you think I'm going too long, okay? But I'm only going to stop if you actually hit me, so you just keep trying, all right, if you missed the first time. Okay, beginnings. Number one, at creation, as we talked about. All right, so here it is. On the seventh day, God ended his work which he had done, and he rested on the seventh day from all his work which he had done. I love that repetition there. Then God blessed the seventh day and sanctified it, because in it he rested from all his work which God had created and made. You notice that repetition in there? It's not just bad writing. It's trying to emphasize these points over and over and over again. Now, in English, you don't see the word Sabbath there. You see seventh day, da-da-da-da-da. But you have a verbal form of Sabbath there where it says that because in it he Sabbathed from all his work which God had created and made. Like God is Sabbathing on this day called the seventh day. And what's really interesting about this is this is where the subversion comes in, because we wouldn't expect this. If you were going to ask me, if you're going to say, hey, Matthew, write a creation story, okay, let's assume I had an idea similar to God's. It's like, let's start with the kind of the basic things, light and darkness, sea and land, and then let's kind of it will be like a crescendo. We'll keep scaling up until we get to the crown jewel of creation, which is human beings who are created in the image of God. Like that should be the pinnacle of creation. That's where it should stop, because we're the best. We're like the best thing that God has ever made. I mean, have you seen a giraffe? There's no competition there. I can't say that. Giraffes are cute. All right, we're going to go back to the aardvark instead. Have you seen the aardvark? We're better than the aardvarks. Unless you're playing Words with Friends, in which case aardvark would be worth a lot of points. Anyways, point being is this is what's so subversive in this creation story, is you would expect it to end with human beings being created. You expect that to be the point. You would expect that to be the thing where God's like, hey, and in a sense it is like after God creates human beings, he's done with his creating, but he's not done with the story, because after he creates human beings, he's like, now, Now I'm going to create this thing that I'm going to rest on this day, on the seventh day. And it says he blessed it and he sanctified it. And it doesn't say that he blessed and sanctified anything else. Now, it is a blessing to be alive. It's a blessing to be a part of this creation, to be sure. But these things are not explicitly said to be blessed and sanctified in the scriptures. It says the seventh day is blessed and sanctified. And it's kind of, that's what's so unexpected. That's a curveball, because you expect him to be done creating human beings and be like, you guys are blessed, you guys are sanctified, you guys are awesome, I'm done. God out, and goes and does whatever he wants to do. But he doesn't. He says, it's this day. It's this day which is blessed and which is sanctified. And what's interesting then is, long before we have the first sense of sacred space in the Bible, the difference between the holy place and the sanctuary and the common place where all the people lived. This first glimpse of Sabbath in the Bible reminds us that there's such a thing as holy time. Holy time. We see the division of sacred space when you have temples and things like that, right? This spot is holy, only so many people can go in there, and only certain people can go in there. And this other space everyone can go into, right? Even in the life of Jesus, where they had the great big temple, Herod's temple, there's a court of the Gentiles and a court of women and a court of, blah, 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 blah. And different people can have closer access to this holy space than other people. Other people have to stay further away from the presence of God. Like that's how the temple, Herod's temple, was divided up, right? Some people can be closer to God than other people, and that's the message it sent. But with Sabbath, we don't have sacred space, we just have sacred time, and everybody enters into sacred time. There's no from 9 a.m. to 10 a.m., it's for the Gentiles, from 10 to 11, it's for this people. Everybody enters into the Sabbath hours. Everybody gets that access. It's not about proximity to God, because God is in these hours. It's not about, some group of people gets to be closer to God than another group of people. It's we all enjoy a different kind of time. So in Greek, we have two different words for time. We have kairos and we have chronos. Chronos, that's a standard word for time. It's referring to a quantity of time. Bake this bread for 2 hours. That's a length of time that we're trying to measure. Kairos refers to a quality of time. And this is something we don't really have in English. We talk that way sometimes, like I had a good time. It's not about how long you were somewhere or with somebody. It's about the kind of time you had. It was a good kind of time. And so Sabbath is not so much chronos time, it's kairos time. It's a quality of time in a sea of time that we're trying to measure hour by hour, minute by minute, the rest of our week, right? You get to work, you put in 8 hours, or these days, 0 hours. And that's how we conceptualize the other 6 days of the week. It's like, I got to be here at 5, I got to be here at 6, I got to go there at 3. That's we're just trying to get through these hours. And the problem with that is sometimes, if you're busy, and who isn't these days? You wake up and it's like, I got this at 8, I got to be at work at 8, I got to have lunch with somebody at noon, I got to be somewhere at 5, I got to be on a stinking Zoom call at 8. Right? This is so you're basically, all you can see is 3 hours ahead of you. And I have this all the time where some of you will come up to me and be like, what do you think about doing this in 2 weeks? And I'm like, I can't see past this week. There's just too much going on. Ask me again in next week, right? Because we have a hard time when we conceive of time this way. We can't see past the next few hours. It's hard. But when we get to Sabbath, it's not that kind of time. It's not meant to be that kind of time. It's a kairos time. It's a quality of time. It's what's going on? Nothing really. It's just about enjoying the time, not about counting the time, not about measuring the time, not about dividing it all up, because I've got to do all these 100 things today. You may have a place to go, you may come to church in the morning. You may go to the park in the afternoon or whatever at 2 o'clock with other people. It's not that you can't schedule things, but it's that we're not a slave to that schedule on this day. Does that make sense? Is the Sabbath a good thing or not? It's a beautiful thing. And it's almost, get this, it's almost as if God knew what our lives would become much later on. And he's like, let me just get this thing straight with you guys from the beginning. I don't want you guys to be a slave to your watch. I don't want you guys to be a slave to the time on your phone. I want there to be some time every week that it's not about the quantity of time, it's about the quality of time, and be intentional about living that kind of life on that day. And that's a beautiful thing. That's a beautiful thing. Jewish scholar Abraham Joshua Heschel said that there's a realm of time where the goal is not to have, but to be. Not to own, but to give. Not to control, but to share. Not to subdue, but to be in accord. And I love this statement. He's talking about the Sabbath. And what is he saying here? It's like the goal is not to have, but to be. Why? Because when we talk about things, when we talk about our commercial interests, our financial interests, we go apply for a job somewhere and they say, we'll give you $15 an hour. What that means is your time is worth $15 for every hour to us. That's what a company is telling you. And if you agree to work for that company, then you are agreeing that my time with you, I believe, is worth $15 for every hour. Like we monetize our lives. We monetize the time in our lives in terms of what we think we're worth at that particular company. Now, okay, I know in Jesus' eyes you're worth a lot more than that, but we're just talking about, if I give my time to this company, this is how much we agree that time is worth. And Heschel is saying here that the Sabbath is a day when the goal is not to have. It's not to put a price on your time. It's not to say an hour of my time, of my presence is worth X amount of dollars. Like we don't even think that way on Sabbath. It's not about figuring out what I'm worth to you. It doesn't matter on Sabbath. That's not the kind of relationship we have on Sabbath. That's not my goal. It's not to monetize an hour of my time so that I can figure out what I can get in this world, what I can buy. The goal is not to accumulate more stuff, but to give things away, right? Because that's the precedent of Sabbath at creation. God is like, all of this is mine. I'm literally creating time for you guys, and I'm giving it to you. I'm organizing it for you. And on the Sabbath, he's like, here's my time with you. All right, so it's not to own more stuff, but to give time and to give things, not to control, but to share, not to subdue, but to be in accord. So the Sabbath was humanity's first lesson in how to live. This is a day where, the first full day that humanity shared together, that Adam and Eve shared together, and their first lesson was the Sabbath. It's that this is a day to rest. Don't kill yourselves with work. You are not machines meant to just work, and never stop. That's not who you are as people. You're meant to rest. You're meant to have a rhythm to your life where you can recharge, where you can rest, and you can commune with your Creator and remember what is most important. Remember that you were created. These are all the things that Sabbath meant. Like if you're just a brand new human being in the world, these are the things that Sabbath is telling you. Just by its very existence, because God blessed and sanctified this time and set it apart for them. So it was humanity's first lesson in living, also the first one we forgot. And so that's why to forget the Sabbath is to forget ourselves. Because if we forget the day that God set apart for us, if we forget the seventh day of creation, it seems inevitable that we'll begin to forget the other ones too, including the day that we were created, and begin to see ourselves differently as well, right? We're not just animals. The creation order makes that explicit, that we're not just animals like other animals, but just maybe smarter. Well, some of us at least. I'm just kidding, all right? Man alive. Rather, God, and that's why it's like the Sabbath is always, when you find it subsequently in the Bible, it's always like the Sabbath is a memorial of your creation, a reminder of your creation, because God wants us to remember that we were created by Him. And that's the way to live life. We'll talk about that more next week. Okay, let's move on to the second thing here, second beginning of Sabbath, which is with Jesus. People ask sometimes, why do Adventists make such a big deal about Sabbath? And the reason why I'd say is because Sabbath and creation and salvation are inseparable thematically in the Scripture. Let me ask you this. Does it matter what day of the week Jesus died on? I think most people would say no. It doesn't really matter whether he died on Tuesday or Wednesday or Sunday or whatever other day of the week. What matters is just that he died, right? And that he rose again for us. It doesn't really matter what day of the week. But it does to Matthew, Mark, and Luke. Because they want to make sure that you understand that Jesus died a few hours before the Sabbath begins. Like, they're explicit about this. Have you ever read these crucifixion accounts and wonder, why do they tell me what time of the day it was? Like, what am I going to do with that information? But they want to make sure you understand what time of the day it was. Because they want to connect Jesus' last few days with the last few days of the creation week. For instance, Jesus died for mankind on the day mankind was created. On the day that we got life from God is the day that Jesus lost his life. Jesus rests in the tomb on the day that mankind was meant to rest, on the Sabbath, right? And Jesus rose on the first day of the week, which is kind of thematically in the Bible called the eighth day of the week, right? Because it symbolizes this is a new start. This is a new creation. This is a new beginning. This is where it all began. Like, not just way back when, in the first day of creation, but Jesus is kind of recreating. He starts with the day man was created. He then goes in his death. He rests in the tomb on the Sabbath day, and then he rises on Sunday, symbolizing a new week has now begun. A new creation has now begun in him. Like, this was intentional. This was intentional. He was mimicking the end and then the beginning of the creation week. This was the whole goal. And then, of course, Jesus on the cross says, it is finished. And, golly, what does Genesis 2 say? By the seventh day, God finished the work he had been doing. So it's almost as if when Jesus dies there, he's like, it's done. My whole life has been about recreating this world. In the Gospel of John, he has these 7 signs which parallel loosely the 7 days of creation. And he's like, by the end of it, he's like, it is finished, right? And what does God do? God says it is finished as well after creation. And so what does God do after he says it is finished? God rests. What does Jesus do after he says it is finished? He rests, right? Like, man, the connections are there. They abound. Jesus didn't work to end the Sabbath. He breathed new life into it. His creative atonement honored the Sabbath by resting on it, just as our Creator did by resting on the original week. And so instead of ending the Sabbath, Jesus added to the Sabbath's prestige by making it a part of the greatest moment in human history. And that's awesome. Okay. I see you. Let's get on to Revelation. All right, you got to make the Adventists happy. The sermon doesn't have revelation. It's not even worth coming to church. I get you guys. Nervous laughter. All right. You notice no one denied it, Conrad, right? They didn't deny it. They just, yeah, it's kind of true. Okay. Anyways, I kid. In Revelation, we also return one last time to creation in this Revelation 12 is this battle between Michael and this ancient serpent called the devil and Satan, which is, as we've talked about a long time ago, this serpent that we find in Revelation 12 is really just a throwback to the serpent we find in the Garden of Eden in Revelation. Genesis 3. Everything is Revelation. We'll just call Genesis like pre-Revelation 65. 65 books before. Right, and you find this conflict between the archangel Michael and the serpent in Revelation 12, which mimics this conflict we find in Genesis 3, because it's kind of like a way of saying, like, are we doomed to kind of constantly repeat the same mistake Eve made at the tree? No, like there will be a victory gained there by Michael the archangel, and the serpent will be defeated, and an angel then, a couple chapters later, goes on to remind the world to worship their Creator. All right, I'm going to turn there. I'm not going to put it on a screen because, y'all have phones and probably physical Bibles. All right, just to remind you guys real quick, we'll get into it, in like a month and a half. All right, in Revelation 14, we have these 3 angels. They go out to tell the world. It says, verse 6, then I saw another angel flying in midair, and he had the eternal gospel, the only time gospel is used in Revelation. He had the eternal gospel to proclaim to those who live on the earth, to every nation, tribe, language, and people. including Americans, I suppose. And he said in a loud voice, "Fear God and give him glory, because the hour of his judgment has come," which always makes us warm and fuzzy. But then he goes on and says, "Worship him who made the heavens and the earth, the sea, and the springs of water," which is almost verbatim from the fourth commandment in Exodus chapter 20. Like he's just as Exodus 20 and the fourth commandment, Sinai reminds us that God created all of these things. And so then in Revelation, this first angel is like, "Hey, I'm going to kind of loosely quote Exodus 20 to remind you also that God created all these things." And the Sabbath always just stands throughout Scripture as this reminder that God created all these things, because it's almost as if God was worried that we would forget. Because forgetting is what we do. I thought I'd hear Laura say amen on that, because I forget everything. She's like, "I don't even need to. You know what you've done. You forget stuff all the time. Need no verbalization from me." We forget all the time. I mean, isn't this the problem? Like Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, in Daniel chapter 5, the big problem with Nebuchadnezzar is he's created this world empire, really one of the world's first superpowers. And he stands up on his balcony and he's like, "Is this not Babylon, which I have created for my own splendor?" It goes on and on and on, and just makes you want to gag. But this is what we do. Like, we create things, we build things, we earn things, we own things, and we begin to think like, "I'm pretty awesome." It's just what we do as human beings. And it doesn't have to be the same stuff for everybody, because oftentimes we look at the other person, we're like, "Look at that person, they're just so arrogant." And then we come back over to whatever it is that we're proud of, and we're like, "Look at this stuff I have or can do or know or earn or whatever. Like, I'm pretty awesome in my own way." And we tend to kind of make ourselves something of cosmic orphans. Like, I did this stuff. I built this stuff. I'm the best. I pulled myself up by my own bootstraps. I didn't have any help. I didn't have any, you know what I mean? And we are always tempted to tell these stories about ourselves as human beings where almost as if we may kind of, we catch the touchdown and then we point up to the sky as if to say like, yeah, I'm going to, maybe they mean it sometimes, and maybe sometimes it's just a habit, but like we always have this tendency of like, I'm going to catch first, then I'm going to give credit, if we're going to give credit at all. I'm going to do my thing and get it, and then I'll give credit. Now, if they are sincere about it, I don't mean to get into that. That's great. But we have this tendency as human beings to just, it's just us. Why? Because I don't see God around me. When I'm going to school, getting my MBA or PhD or whatever, it's like I don't see God next to me studying. He didn't give me the answer to that quiz. Like, I didn't see him write it on a piece of paper and pass it to me. Right? So we have this tendency of like, well, I must have done it. Even if like somewhere I pay lip service to, and credit to him, like I must have done it. That's what Nebuchadnezzar did. That's what Nimrod did. I mean, man alive. We don't have to know a lot about Nimrod, but if you call somebody a Nimrod, like his reputation is secure. Right? Like, over and over and over again, we see this. And like, this is why from Genesis and then Exodus, where the fourth commandment is, all the way to Revelation, there's this, God is just constantly wanting to warn us and remind us, like, just don't forget your Creator. Don't forget where you came from. This is why, by the way, the commandment right after the Sabbath is to honor your father and mother, which is another way of saying you need to respect where you came from. You did not, Jesus may have come from a virgin birth. You did not. You did not, even if you didn't have the greatest parents in the world, even if they weren't there, whatever your story is. Like, you came from somewhere, and you owe it to those people, even if they were otherwise not fantastic people. Or you owe it to them. You owe it to somebody, and they owe their existence to somebody else, and they owe their existence to somebody else. And we can do this all day, going through the genealogies, but it all ends at one point, which is that human beings were created by God, and this is what we are bidden to remember constantly throughout the Bible, because it is something we are constantly in danger of. What was I going to say? Oh, yeah, forgetting. Thank you. All right. I want to go to Norway. I don't think there's beaches there, so Laura can come too. Sigvig Tonstad wrote this just masterful book. We're going to be spending some time in this book as we go through this series called The Lost Meaning of the Seventh Day. And he's talking about this first angel here in Revelation. He says, when the first angel calls on those who live on the earth to worship him who made heaven and earth, he is deploying the language of the fourth Sabbath commandment. He goes on and says, because the one who made the heaven and earth and springs of water is also the person who rested on the seventh day and consecrated it or made it holy. And I think this is a really important point, because what it means is that in its own way, this angel is not just calling us to remember our Creator, but he's calling us to a particular remembrance of our Creator, which is in enjoying the day that God created us to enjoy. That's how we, on a weekly basis, remember our Creator. And maybe as Adventists, we can do a better job of being intentional about that. It's not just a day to go to church. It's a day where we come from wherever it is that we come from in the week, whatever it is that we've done, whatever it is that we're wrestling with or enjoying, or, whatever success we may have had. And we come together and we say, hey, sister so-and-so, hey, brother so-and-so, let's remind ourselves today that we were created by God, and that whatever defeat you may have faced this week is not final. Whatever success you may have had this week is not yours alone, but that we were created. And the one who created you can recreate you as well if you've lost your way in life and messed some things up. And in the end, he's going to recreate all of us and make us better. So I do have a shot at becoming handsome. It's my only shot, so that's why I'm a Christian. It's that deep. No. Right? Like, so this is what we're coming to remind ourselves weekly. It's like we enjoy creation. We enjoy being alive, and we celebrate life, and we celebrate the one who gave it to us. And we recognize that everything we have comes from him, that we wouldn't be here if it wasn't for him. So even if we didn't have a great week, we still celebrate God because we had a week. We had something rather than nothing, and it's only because of him. And that's what Sabbath is all about. It is the particular way hinted at here in Revelation 14 that we are remembering our Creator. So we find the Sabbath from beginning to end, and the trajectory of Sabbath in the Bible is not becoming less important, but actually becoming more important the further into the Bible you read. And so that's why when we get to the very, very, very end in Revelation 21 and 22, and we find this fantastic and very weird world that we find there, we find this kind of the meaning of the Sabbath really embedded in this idea here in chapter 22. Again, I'm not going to put it on screen. You can read this one if you want. In verse 1, it says that an angel showed me the river of the water of life, as clear as crystal, flowing from the throne of God and of the Lamb, down the middle of the great street of the city, and on each side of the river stood the tree of life, bearing 12 crops of fruit, yielding its fruit every month, and the leaves of the tree are for the healing of the nations. What I love about that is, here's the tree of life, right? Throwing us back to the Garden of Eden again. We get to eat it. I don't know what 12 crops of fruit, if that means there's like 12 different harvests throughout the year, which means, there's always some fruit on the tree, or whether it means there's like a different kind of fruit every month. That would be cool. Also some cool combinations of a fruit. I'm not trying to tell God what to do, but an orange banana hybrid would be a really interesting thing to think about before we get to that point, okay? Anyways, it's there. And the leaves of the tree, I don't know exactly what we're going to do with the leaves. Maybe we roll them up, but that might be a little too far. But the leaves of the tree, we put them in a salad. That's what I meant. We put them in a salad. Are there for the healing of the nations. So we have the fruit and the leaves. And this tree, I love it, like somehow it grows over this river and the river runs through it or something. And the tree then is watered by this river that goes through the middle of the street. And by the way, back in the ancient world, having water go down the street was great because it washed all the stuff you just threw out of your house into the street out too. So we have sanitation service in heaven naturally. And so like the streets are always going to be clean, which is a fantastic thing, especially if you live in downtown somewhere. So the streets are going to be clean because this river is running down it. But where does the river come from? It flows from the throne of God. So every time you eat the fruit from the tree and you enjoy the life that God has given you, you see the river which waters the tree, and then you follow the river up and you realize it comes from God, because everything good, everything to your benefit comes from God. And you will be reminded for all of eternity that the joy you have, that the life you have, that everything you have is something that flows from Him. And this is the lesson that God is trying to embed in the Sabbath that we celebrate every single week. That it would be a day that we would remember that 52 times a year for as long as we should live. And I think that's pretty sweet. I think that's something we need to be reminded of. Even if we're, good Christians, quote unquote. We need to be reminded of this constantly. Because, man, it's so easy to get jaded. Everybody is cynical now. Even if you're not so arrogant as to think everything comes, you've done everything. It's easy to just kind of, like nothing good is going on. Politics stinks. This part of the culture stinks. Everything stinks. There's people in the church getting arrested and, investigations, and people were doing wrong things that they're getting outed, and it's like, man, is there anything good left in the world? And I mean, like, this is the point, is you come together on Sabbath and be like, oh, yeah. There is something good left in the world. That river of life that is to come is flowing from the throne of God, and it's meant to be flowing through our hearts as well when we celebrate Sabbath and remember our Creator. So yeah, we're going to have fun this summer. We're going to talk about Sabbath in even greater detail. Let me pray with you, and then you can go in peace. Father, just want to thank you very much for this book. I guess, Lord, you just could have given us a list, like, I created you, Jesus died for you, accept Him and have faith, and we'll see you soon. I mean, I guess, Lord, that could have been the Bible. But you gave us so much in this book, and especially, Lord, you gave us the Sabbath as this monument, not just to your creative power, but eventually, Lord, it became a reminder of our own salvation. And it becomes a reminder of what you have in store for us in the future. I guess, Lord, so that no matter which direction this world goes, when it stinks, when there's wars around the world and people are suffering, it reminds us that this is not all that there is, but that the best is yet to come. Oh, Father, we need that reminder. We need that reminder. And so on this day of all days, we celebrate you, and we're thankful for that promise. And we say, even so, come, Lord Jesus. Bring it on. Bring it on. In Jesus' name, amen.